Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Hey everybody, welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I am here with Megan Cannon today. She's a sports psychologist and she has so much to tell us about her life growing up and her career today. So Megan, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, the first thing we have in common is that my children go to Allentown Central Catholic High School, where I understand you graduated from.
I did.
And you were a major athlete. You competed in a lot of sports. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you got involved in sports. What was the first thing you participated in?
I think 5 years old, maybe. I was on my first swim team at, the pool over in Emmaus that we belonged to. And so started then and then just got into pretty much everything. My parents were really awesome in just allowing me and giving me the opportunities to try out a bunch of different sports through school, through rec programs, through club programs. And so primarily stuck with swimming and softball, but then I danced from when I was 3 through college.
And dance is such a big world in and of itself, and you don't often hear a lot of dancers don't have the time or to participate in other team sports, but you were able to do both. And how was that for you?
Busy.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother.
Okay.
But it was, it was just a lot of, I look back on the schedule now and I'm like, I don't even have energy. Like, I get tired thinking about having to leave school to go to one practice and then leave that practice early to go to something else, to then go to something else and then get home and do homework later.
Yeah, well, I can tell you get to relive that experience if you have children someday, because you start running them around and you think, I did this as a kid and I remember loving it, but where do they find the time and the energy to get it done? So I've experienced that for sure. Tell me about yourself as a kid. Were you always competitive? Did you have a certain nature? Were you the team leader?
I think the competitive thing was not my lean. So there's like sports like soccer and that kind of stuff where it's a little bit more aggressive. And it wasn't my style. So I think just for me, it was a little bit more focused and I just liked having stuff to do. And it was neat because of having the opportunity to be involved with different activities. If I was kind of over swimming, I had the opportunity to look forward to softball. And then when softball was like over it, well, then it was dance recital time. And so it always just I had the opportunity to really just be engaged, because the moment I would get burnt out or just like, oh my gosh, the season needs to be over, I already had something to look forward to, which was something completely different. And then got to then lean into that. And then by the time the season was over, then the next season would start. And it was nice to have that.
It's a nice thing. I mean, I want to get into a little bit about your career as a sports psychologist and what you take from that and what you hope to teach with that. But one of the things you hear a lot about is this burnout concept in kids. And I hear you talking about sports in a seasonal way. And that seems to be disappearing more and more and more, kids are supposed to do sports all year long, the same sport. And, how did you find that for you to have that balance as a kid? And do you feel like your parents were aware that they were helping foster that in you?
I mean, we'll say yes, but probably not. I think it was because at the time, club sports were there, but there maybe was 1 or 2 clubs for soccer or softball, or an AAU was a little bit there. But now,
so you would play the sport when the school had the sport, or
Yep.
when the town had the sport. And that's,
Yep.
I guess, the differentiation now is, for people who may not be aware, we've got these club sports and these elite programs that you try out for, and then they run all year long.
All year long. And I did play club for some sports, but it still just wasn't as large of a commitment. But now the athletes I work with are playing a single sport all year round. They're actually having their coaches discourage them from being in other sports. And what we're seeing in terms of the research of burnout, it's increasing burnout. If I'm only doing one thing, maybe that thing is wrestling, that's the only thing I'm doing, and I'm just having a rough season or I'm having a bad day, but that's the only pillar my identity is on, it's tough, and there's not a lot of good stress outlets then. We're also seeing a lot more severe injuries at younger ages because they're using, as an example, if I play soccer and I'm a right forward, well, I'm using those same muscle groups over and over and over and over again. And so we're seeing an increase of these much more serious injuries at younger ages, like multiple ACL tears, these pretty significant surgeries, a lot of overuse injuries that are now a result of the culture.
And I would imagine that the physical injury part plays into the psychology, mental part, because if you're injured and you can't do the thing that you've now filled all your time doing, that's got to play a big role in when we see depression in kids.
So much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, as a kid, you did all these sports, your parents were encouraging you to try different things. When did you start to see a connection and know what you wanted to do? I mean, were you one of those kids that in high school you said, this is what I'm going to do with my life, or did it evolve?
It was in high school, I took a psychology class. It was one that was offered, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't know enough about it nor the field. And so I went into undergrad undecided with the mindset of, I'll take a couple extra psychology classes because I think that might be something that I'm interested in, but I don't really know. So I did. And then during my sophomore year of college, was like, okay, this is a good fit for me. However,
and you went to Wilkes, right?
I did. I went to Wilkes, and it was one of those things where they had a really great psychology program, although that was not my intention, originally going there. But with psychology, you really can't do anything with a bachelor's. And so when I made that decision, it was like, well, you're going to have to continue going to school.
You will need more education to turn this into a career.
Yeah.
So that's a question people get, right? So you tell your parents, I finally decided, and I'm going to go into psychology.
Yep.
What's the response?
My mom literally goes, and she's very proud of this statement. She goes, okay, well, so you know that you either have to go to grad school or you're going to be saying, hello, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? And I was like, oh, okay. But she was right, and that was a lot of the feedback I was getting as well from professors and stuff of like, it's a great field to go into, but you're very limited if you only have a bachelor's degree in that. Before
we continue down the path of figuring out more about your education, tell me a little bit about in high school or first jobs. Did you have any kind of part-time jobs? I know it's difficult when you play sports, but tell me about that.
Well, the great thing about swimming is that you kind of have a job if you want to in being a lifeguard. So
good point.
Yeah. So I lifeguarded, I think, since I was like 14. Originally at a pool I used to swim at, but then I started lifeguarding for the city of Allentown. And so I was over at Mac Pool for years in Irving, and then I would teach swim lessons. And then when I was in college, there was a YMCA that was really close, and so I got a job lifeguarding there, and then would teach swim lessons. So that was
what was your stroke?
Freestyle.
Okay. And did you ever do any of the team where you all, I know it has a name, like a medley?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yep.
That's amazing. And so what do you feel like now you've gone into this field? Did you learn from those early days of lifeguarding? I mean, those are some different experiences, right? Being at a town pool, being at a Y pool.
Yeah.
And then teaching lessons is a whole nother thing. You bring teaching into the mix, and it's completely different.
It is.
Tell us a little bit about those early experiences and lessons you might have learned.
Learned a lot of patience because you'd have to say, because since we were a city pool, there was no memberships, and so it wasn't like you would see the same people every day. I mean, you would see a lot of the same people, but then there was also visitors and family, and so we didn't have band tests, so we had to make saves a fair amount, but then you also had to constantly be saying the rules over and over and over again because they maybe weren't there ever before. And so it was a lot of patience. And even now, if I'm at a pool and I hear somebody running, there's this like instinctual like walk, like, and I've now like toned it down. I just say it in my head, but it's just after years and years of that, it's just like a reflex.
It's one of those things you happen to notice and make sure you want people to know. What do you feel you look back and learned in your sports career that has helped you in the field that you're in now with sports psychology?
I think just the balance, and then also the respect for competing is tough. There's, looking back at it, I don't think I ever like had a label of it, but I definitely was anxious, especially in softball, or like kind of waiting of, am I going to get the ball now? What happens if I mess up? And it's tough. Competing is really stressful. And so I still, as an adult, try to put myself in situations that emulate that so that I can still connect in that way with my athletes and just remind myself, although for that, and I'm viewing it as like this is a high school game that you have, and 20 years from now, you're not even going to remember it. But for them in that moment, they are very stressed, and so I still try to do those things to keep myself mentally fresh on what that experience is like. But then I think doing it for so long, it just growing up really having that respect of like, I get it.
Yeah, it's such a balance, I think, what you're saying, because you're talking about giving kids perspective, but also recognizing and acknowledging that anxiety in that moment is real. Mm-hmm. It's not something you can logic your way out of or perspective your way out of sometimes. I think that really recognizing that this is a real thing that children are experiencing is so important. So good. Well, we're going to talk more about your continued education, because your mother gave you good advice, right? She said you're going to have to get more education. So I want to hear about that. And then I want to hear about how you have translated this into a career. So we'll be back with Meg and Cannon. Stick with us. Time to take your workout outdoors. Discover Lehigh Valley is a great resource for finding easily accessible nature trails with stunning views and challenging terrain. Whether you're exploring the Delaware and Lehigh Trail or going for a jog on the Ironton Rail Trail, explore Discover Lehigh Valley to get you started. Follow them on Instagram, Lehigh Valley PA. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Megan Cannon. She's a sports psychologist. She was telling us a little bit about her days as an athlete and as a kid playing 4 different sports and dancing and playing basketball and swimming competitively and then part-time jobs. But you go to college, you finally figure out, I like this psychology thing. Did you marry it with sports right away?
No, I didn't even know that it existed. It felt like the right thing and a good fit for me. I took other classes. It just didn't. And other disciplines, and it just, for me, didn't seem like a good fit. And so I initially was conceptually going in for health psychology, so really just trying to work with people promoting healthy behaviors and that type of thing. So when I was applying for graduate programs, I just applied to PhD programs just because I was like, oh, if I'm going to apply, I might as well just like do it. And I think looking back, there was a lot of ignorance of it, of just like, I'm just going to do it, and we're just going to see. And I knew what I needed to do for it, but I think
you didn't
piecing it all together,
right? You just said,
I was
let's
like,
go
oh,
for it,
let's
and
toss
go
some
to
apps
school,
out.
might as well do it. Yep,
yeah.
Awesome. And so where did you land, and when did you figure out what you wanted your focus to be? So
I went to Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I was in their PhD program. And the unique part about that program is it's a larger program. They have the PhD program, but then also a PsyD, which is a more specific doctor of psychology, less research, more clinical. But because they have 2 programs, their faculty is a little bit larger than a typical doctoral program. So on staff, there was a sports psychologist who actually happened to be from originally the Philadelphia area. And so over the course of time there, I had the opportunity just to take some classes with him and meet with him. They had a sports psychology elective practicum that you could choose to do during your 4th year as an extra experience. In his mind, it was not one that you did early because it wasn't basic clinical skills. It's more, we're learning this more specific area in psychology. So during my 4th year there, I had the opportunity to be within that program, and we were the therapists that were on retainer for the student athletes at the university. So they would never go to the counseling center. They would only come to us. So we did clinical work, but also performance work, and then also a lot of concussion, return to play, testing and protocol stuff.
Sounds like a really amazing environment to not only learn, but get hands-on experience. And I guess when people are thinking about getting additional education, it seems pretty daunting, especially if you're talking about a doctorate program. Do you have advice for anybody that might be considering this at any stage of their career?
Yeah, I always just tell people it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And although it is a lot of work, and it looks like a lot of work, and it sounds like a lot of work, you're not doing it all in a week. And you get it, day by day, class by class, assignment by assignment. And the stress changes and evolves, where initially it might be only classes, and then it's class and clients, and then it's different projects and comp exams and different dissertations and applying for internships. But
it's building blocks. It's building blocks. And, it's funny. I often think how you said you really weren't sure. You just dove in. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that youthful ignorance is bliss motto works great. And the older we get, the more daunting things are, because we can see the path, right? We can see perspective. We can understand how big this thing will be to take on. But if you take it in chunks, it seems more attainable, I think. So that's cool. So when you graduate, what's the first move? Where do you go now? What do you now you've got to prove your mother, right? You got to say, I can get this is a job I can get paid to do.
Yeah. And so the way that psychology programs are set up, you have 4 years at school, and then you do a predoctoral internship, which is the same as a med school residency. You apply across the country. There's a computer algorithm that then you get matched and you get an email on a certain day telling you have to be here by that day. Congratulations. Or like, sorry, you got to try again. And so at the time I was applying, there was only one sports psychology internship in the entire country. The others, they would say minors, but it was experiences through their counseling centers that if they had athletes come in, then you might get to work with them. So there really wasn't sports psychology opportunities at the time. So I wound up matching at a program in Los Angeles, working with children and families. And so I did my time there. But right when I had got there, I started looking around to how can I get myself back into the world of sports psychology? And so after I was licensed or graduated, then you have to do a postdoc, get all these extra hours, take a big licensing exam. So that process was about 2.5 to 3 years. Then I moved back here and joined a group practice initially, which was all sports psychology and sport nutrition. And then August of 2018 went independent.
That's amazing. What was the impetus for you to go independent? I mean, you had clearly spent a lot of time learning all the right things from the right people, but it is a big leap and it's a big difference to run your own practice, your own business, really, versus working as a part of a group.
Yeah, it was part of it was kind of the evolution of the group itself, and a bunch of us had broken off and gone independent. But then for me, like that was my long-term vision, and so the opportunity arrived for me to kind of do it a little bit sooner than I had conceptually thought, and so I just jumped on it, and it was like, all right, just like grad school, we're just going to do it and try it out and see what happens.
For people who may not be familiar with sports psychology, what has changed, especially I would say in the last decade in this field? I mean, since you started studying to doing your postdoctorate work to working in groups and you work with a lot of different universities now. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. But what has changed, I guess, in the world's perspective or in the industry itself to allow this to thrive and to grow as a field?
Yeah, well, I think now people are just talking about it. I mean, sports psychology has existed for years and years and years, but it was not a secret, but it wasn't a secular people that were engaged with it, professional athletes, organizations, they weren't talking about it as much. And so I think there's right now this convergence of we're seeing the cultural trends in mental health in our country, and they're not great. Now we're also having professional athletes, your Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, Kevin Love, Brandon Brooks, all of these people that are successes coming out and saying, hey, I've struggled with this stuff. I used this to help me. You don't need to tough it out, because being tough is actually admitting that you need help. And so I think there's a lot of changing and evolving messages with it.
It is incredible to watch. I mean, just that recent Michael Phelps ad where he's talking about depression and how therapy helped him. I thought, wow, is that so revolutionary? And we need to talk about it in that way. What about with kids? When you're working with student athletes, do you see that the change, or is there a change happening in the parents? Because so often this stuff is driven by the pressures put on kids by the families.
It's all over the map. I mean, I've heard a lot of things, where it's, the car ride homes are pretty awful for kids sometimes, and they just get yelled at. And I hear, just in the room with the athletes, I'll hear comments of oh, well, if you don't perform this, I'm done paying for you to do this. Or if you're not doing this, you're not getting that. And it's although the parents' intentions may be coming from a good place of we're trying to push you to do it, when a 13-year-old hears that, well, now when they go to compete or go to practice, in addition to the stress they already have, now they're oh, well, mom and dad are going to pull the plug or say
That's
this.
in the background. And I have to tell you, I think that as a parent with kids who compete in sports, it's really a challenge. And I pride myself on being pretty hyper aware of these things, and having worked with therapists, having worked with business coaches, and yet you still kind of fall into this trap of get it together. Yeah. Because this is a lot of time. This is money. This is, at least, I don't care if you win or lose, but at least be focused.
Yep.
And so how important is it? I mean, is there any part of your practice that actually works with the families?
Yeah, so sometimes we wind up doing a little bit, if that's sort of where the need would be. But also whenever I work with teams, especially at the high school level or club level, if they ever do packages of team consulting and we meet a couple times, I always add on hey, if you get any type of package here, you get a free parent session. So I'm going to come in, we're going to have a meeting just for the parents, and we're going to just talk about tips of things for you guys to think about.
That's so great to, if you think about it from a school standpoint and educationally, right? We spend so much time saying, as parents, we need you invested in the school. You got to show up for the PTO. You've got to volunteer. You need to go to a field trip. But sometimes when it comes to sports, we're only looking for the parents to, raise the funds or drive the kid, but forgetting that the dynamic really all starts at home. So I love that you do that. What other things have you incorporated into your practice that are important to you or you feel are unique and needed in the sports psychology arena? Yeah, well, I think a lot of it really is education. And I view my role outside of when it's individual work with clients, yes, there is a lot of educating that I do in that space. But when I go out and do team consulting, when I speak at universities, when I speak at conferences, my goal is I'm educating this group of people on a skill set that they don't have. We teach basic math. We do not teach basic emotions. Now there are 2 states in America that's requiring mental health be a part of their education, but Pennsylvania is not yet one of them. And so if I can
piggyback on basketball, soccer, football, swimming, and have you invested in what I'm saying because you want to do better at your sport or you want to have a really good championship season. But in the back of my mind, I know, like, if we're talking about anxiety, yes, we'll frame it right now in terms of soccer or lacrosse, but this is a skill that you will use for the rest of your life. And so that, for me, is what drives me in doing that, because it's a skill set which I have a backdoor in of their engagement,
Sure.
But in reality, it's the bigger picture. So I do a lot of educating.
You enter through sports, but you relate it to their entire lives. That's so important, Megan. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, I do want to talk a little bit about your goals, where you're going. I know you've done a lot of media appearances and podcasting, and just really what you hope to bring to the world with your expertise. So we'll be right back in just a minute. There's nothing like wintertime in the Christmas city, but any time of year, Bethlehem's rich history, culture, food, and fun make it a great hangout spot. Take a walk on the artsy South Side, catch a great band at Steel Stacks, or enjoy the quaint history of Hotel Bethlehem. There are so many options, but before you book your trip, head over to Facebook and like Lehigh Valley, PA. Before you know it, you'll have a full itinerary of places you won't want to miss. Hey everybody, I'm back with Megan Cannon. Megan is a licensed sports psychologist, and she has quite a career. One of the things you've done is you've actually gotten on a pretty big stage, so it's pretty great to have a practice and get some clients, which you've done successfully. But you also now do a lot of speaking engagements. You've been on ESPN, you have a podcast, you've been on multiple podcasts. Tell me a little bit about where you're going with your business. It's relatively new, and what your goals are.
So now, it's just continuing to be a resource for athletes and teams in this area, doing what I can to do that. But then on a wider scale, I've had the opportunity to be involved with conferences called the Lead Sports Summit. It's for female teenage swimmers. And so through that, I've really gotten immersed in the swimming community. And so with a swim organization based out in Houston, we're now doing some resources for the parents, where we're doing some videos, and then they are going to have some follow-up Facebook Live opportunities for the parents to ask questions on different comments. I'm currently working on developing a online-based training curriculum so that athletes, to have a larger reach rather than within the area, to have the opportunity to then get that education out to someone who might be in Iowa, who, they and I would not be able to connect individually. And so trying to make that content and curriculum more accessible. So that's the current project that we're working on, in addition to speaking coming up soon at the National College Swim Coach Convention and doing a couple other things like that.
What do you find are some of the hurdles that you have in getting people to recognize that they might need some help in this area, whether it's with you or one of your counterparts across the country? What do you see as a trend that might be, just something people need to kind of get over?
Yeah, I think that people just don't get it. And I say that like in just a very broad perspective. I think in the overall, the mental health world, we're slowly coming to accept it. We're slowly seeing, it's not just you're weak, like there is stuff going on. And so I think slowly over time, as that's changing, that's helpful. But a lot of coaches and stuff I work with, like some people, they just like don't understand what I do. And the majority of time, whenever I say, I'm a sports psychologist, the automatic response is, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. That's awesome. But like, what do you do? 98 to 99% of the time, no one has any idea what I do. And I think that that's a big piece of it. And so a lot of times I'll see some coaches they're totally bought in, they get it, whether they've had experience with it or not, like they're just so on board. But then I see some other coaches that are like, that's a waste of time. There's no reason that we should do this. Like we need to, this has worked for us before, so we're going to keep doing it. And then there's those in between that don't really either have the experience or don't really have an opinion yet on it.
Yeah, so maybe they just haven't been exposed either. So to dismiss any of the myths, tell us, what do you do as a sports psychologist and what is your goal?
Yeah, and so I kind of view it as I have like three silos. I know we've talked about like the speaking as one of them. I also do a lot of team consulting, where I will be with a team or a program, preseason through their season, and we'll have meetings throughout, and those are either large group meetings. Sometimes we'll strategically break them up, whether it's like with swim programs, male, female, or freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, in high school, college, just because they're all having different experiences. It's different being a freshman versus senior, and the different stressors. So that the team consulting piece is sort of the second portion. And then the third portion is the individual practice. And so I have athletes where sometimes they're just coming in really very sport performance based, where it's like, we're doing all right, but we just want to get better. But then I also have a lot of athletes with anxiety, both inside and outside of sport. A lot of times it surfaces in sports, whether it's like panic attacks in the water or in middle of games, or like it's there, but then also in other areas. So I work with a lot of anxious
I was going to ask you about that actually. And how often do you find that the sport might be covering up, as you described earlier, this bigger potential mental health issue going on with a kid? That the sport, a lot of times we say sports are an outlet, right? And that's true, but to a certain extent. And then at some point, I feel like sometimes there's a crossover where it's also then masking what's really going on. How often do you find working with a team, say, that you'll identify a couple of kids who really actually need a different level of help?
Yeah, it's a fair amount. And as I think, one of the things I love about sports and youth sports when done right is it's a pressure cooker. And we have the opportunity to put a teenage individual in a situation that is really stressful. And we're creating it, right? I mean, it doesn't, right? We're doing it. It's not like their life is in danger. Right? And so then it gives us the opportunity to see where there may be some skill deficits. And so I think in that way, it's very helpful of saying, all right, if you're really struggling right now in like basketball, cool. Let's learn some stuff now, because when you're 35, it's not going to be that like safety net of a just kind of confabulated situation. But
I love that, because I try to say to my kids on many occasions, not necessarily just around sports, but life things, I'll sit them down and say, so I want to talk to you about this, not because it matters that much right now, but it's a skill you're going to need at 25 when you go to get a job, or at 30 when you go to be a parent, or whatever that is, and trying to frame it so that it's more than just that moment that they're trying to live through.
Yep. And so I think that's where it's a really neat interaction. But with the culture and the trend in sports where now you're playing 9, 10, 11 months the same sport all the time, there's less different pieces of their identity coming together where it's like, oh, well, I'm Sarah and I'm a swimmer, period. Like now, if the sport isn't going well or you have so much practice, now that initial stress outlet has become the stressor, but they don't have any other outlets to then fill that gap of the stress outlet.
Well, Megan, before I let you go, this is super fascinating, and I love what you do, and I think it's so incredibly valuable for our society, and we're so lucky to have you in this area. If you can leave our audience and our listeners with one piece of advice, what is that advice that you want people to hear really clearly from you right now?
Awareness. That is really the key to, I think, not only in sports and athletics, but also overall. I think there's this idea in our culture that like we just like avoid it and not even address it and just pretend we're not stressed or pretend we're not whatever. Like that's when we have a problem. If we're aware of just, I am really stressed right now, or I'm really worried about this big project, or I'm really angry that my coworker or my teammate did this or that. Yeah, there may be nothing that you can do about it directly to address that situation or thing. However, if you're at least aware of, okay, I am really stressed about this right now. Okay, that's not going to make it worse. It's not going to make it grow. Acknowledging it can actually help decrease it so that you can walk through that situation with yourself being a little bit more calm and regulated in a larger stressful situation.
Wonderful advice, Megan. Well, thank you so much. And we've learned a lot today. Before we close out, I do want to learn a couple things about what some of your favorite things are in the Lehigh Valley. You have the opportunity to work with lots of students, work with lots of people, and you meet so many people. What do you love to do in your downtime?
I am a big fan. I work out a lot, so I work over at F13 Performance and do a lot of stuff there. I'm also involved in some running groups in the area, and so even yesterday we had a trail or 2 days ago at the indoor water park in the Poconos. And so we like meet monthly and we'll do some fun stuff. So I do a lot of trail running and hiking and
this is such a great
outside.
Area for it too.
It's a great area. Yeah. And there's such great access to the Appalachian Trail. And so there's a lot of just outdoor stuff very close by, which I think is wonderful.
All right. If you're not being physical outside and you're going out to eat or you're going to do something, what is your favorite place to go? Where's your favorite place to go?
Oh my gosh. Loaded question. Let's see. It's a Union and Finch. I just love that place. Great vibe, great food, good brunch.
What do you tell people when you travel around about the Lehigh Valley? What do you want them to know about this area that people may not know?
That it's just growing. I mean, it's so amazing coming from growing up here. I was away for several years and then coming back, and it's just new restaurants, new buildings, new places. So I think it's really neat just to see the amount of money that's being poured into the area to make it grow, and new housing, and just seeing the evolution of things like good restaurants and food and activities and festivals. That stuff didn't exist, when I was growing up here. I mean, maybe to a much smaller degree, but it's nice to see the evolution now.
And so much of it is due in part to people like yourself choosing to live here and make your career here. So thank you for doing that as well. Any time of year, the Lehigh Valley is an exceptional place for food, drink, and entertainment. Whether you're cooling off from the summer heat at Dutch Springs or shopping for just the right kind of gift at Chris Kindle Market, you will make memories all year round. For more information on what the Lehigh Valley has to offer, check out Discover Lehigh Valley's website at discoverlehighvalley.com. All right, everybody, I'm here with Megan Cannon, sports psychologist, but now it's my turn to turn the psychology on you. Are you ready? These are rapid-fire questions. You have not heard these, correct?
I have not.
All right, here we go. What is your favorite hobby or pastime?
Cooking.
Cooking. Okay, exciting. What's the favorite meal you like to cook?
I love cooking anything with pesto.
Okay, pesto, always a winner.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if you won the lottery, what's the first thing you would do?
Buy Jeep, Wrangler, 4-door, hardtop.
Color?
Gray.
You have thought about this. What is one food you couldn't live without?
Eggs.
I might say eggs too. It's pretty high up there for me. All right, what actor would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
Anna Kendricks.
Oh, nice. If you didn't have the job you have now, what would you be doing instead?
I actually have no idea.
Good thing you found a job you love.
I know.
I thought maybe
really
you were going to say
know.
coach or something, but
I don't know. Maybe.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Name a person who inspires you.
My mom. She's also a local business owner.
Do you want to give her a plug?
Yeah, she's, if you want your kitchen done, do it now because she's rolling out. But yeah, she is a kitchen and designing business on Tillman, and I'm on Tillman Street as well. So we're literally a mile and a half away from each other.
I love that. So you're both business owners and you work nearby.
Yep. Kitchens by Whipco. There she is.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Megan. Appreciate it. For all of you out there, thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do so or check us out on YouTube. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey, it's Steve. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos.
To see more of The Peak TV, check out our website, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and catch us on WFMZ Channel 69.